I want to build the best seed stage venture firm on the planet, and I'm going to do this for the next 30 plus years. About to go into a board meeting of one of the most exciting companies on the planet right now, after starting a company from a napkin and taking that through to potentially impact one of the largest food value chains in the world.
Welcome to Brick by Brick, episode 18, with Mike Annunziata, founding partner of Also Capital, co-founder of Farther Farms, and board member at Varda Space. This is going to be a big one.
I wanted to start just by saying I'm very grateful for this opportunity. A few years ago, I would have dreamt of being able to have conversations with people like yourself, with everything you've accomplished. So yeah, it's a nice moment, and I'm really glad to get to speak to you today. Maybe you could open up with a sort of brief history of Mike and how you got to what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in venture and startups for about a decade now. Started my career at the Soros family office in New York when I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And then got the investment bug while I was there, working closely with the investment teams on their transactions and on different things on the regulatory and the legal side, and had an opportunity to go work at the Cornell Endowment for about 3.5 years as an allocator, most of the time on private equity and venture, but did cover a lot of different asset classes and got my CFA while I was there. And that really taught me a lot about kind of where the bar was for kind of exceptional investing talent and what that looked like, and how to generate, truly great returns and what that looked like as well. And they sent me to business school. So did that after a couple of years at the endowment at Johnson. In business school, did two big things. One, I was an investment partner at Dorman Fund, which is where my kind of pre-seed seed investing journey started on the direct side. And I started what the market would now call a deep tech company. It was a food tech company at the time that I started in 2016, focused on doing shelf life extension for value-added food products using high-pressure carbon dioxide. And we started that, me and a co-founder, in a lab at Cornell. Took the business plan from a napkin through to closing our Series B about 2 months ago, led by Strategic. Kind of built that up to 30 people and a 25,000 square foot pilot facility in upstate New York. I had product in the market for 6-9 months as part of a phase of development that we were working on, and now the thing's kind of in a good place to go on for the next little journey. And I transitioned to a board role in that company about 2 months ago, a company called Farther Farms. Transitioned to a board role about 2 months ago after the Series B closed to be full-time on my early stage investing activities, which kind of started, like a lot of founders, as angel investing personally, investing alongside friends as angels, then running small SPVs, dating back as far as early 2019 really is when we started, and we've had a lot of early success. No IPOs yet, but a lot of early success. Couple small exits that have done well, and a really cool portfolio. Most importantly, really great, ambitious, smart founders that we've been able to back over the last couple of years. And for me, a really kind of hair on fire opportunity to lean in full time on that brand that we kind of have slowly built, backing really great folks and entrepreneurs, and do that full time and start building the firm. So that's me at a professional level. At a personal level, wife and two little girls living in New York City, and just kind of enjoying the chaos, but also the wonderful thing that is kind of life and building a family in your 30s.
Amazing. I mean, what a career so far. And I'm going to do my best, everyone listening, to try and touch on all those points, because each of those could probably be a podcast episode in itself.
Yeah.
But off air, I asked you what the best pitch deck you've ever seen was. And then you referred to a conversation you had with Will, who's one of the founders of Varda, rather than necessarily a pitch deck and that conversation. So I thought that'd be a great place to start. If you could tell the story about what is Varda, who is Will, and what did you talk about on the rooftop?
Yeah. So for those who are not aware, obviously, so Varda is the first to be commercializing in-space manufacturing. and microgravity accessible to commercial partners across pharmaceutical applications, communications applications, research applications. Started in 2020 by Will and Delian Asperhoff, who's a partner at Founders Fund. And Will and I have been friends for a long time and angel investing together under the also umbrella for a bunch of years. And I remember him getting a phone call from Delian and then calling me and telling me about it. And when I heard the idea, thought this is kind of crazy. It was in space manufacturing. But I remember him having a very unique ability to articulate why the technical risks and the business opportunities were at the sweet spot of difficulty and the right moment in time to really have the right degree of risk to be taking and still generate a venture return. And to your illusion of the conversation on the roof, we were on the roof with some friends one evening. I want to say it was late August, early September, shortly after he'd started looking at it. And he spent probably 2 hours walking us through kind of the engineering, the history of low-cost reentry capsules and what's happening now, of the cost of launch and how all these things would come together to give this particular moment in time the right opportunity to build a Varda Space. And taking what seemed like a crazy concept and illustrating through conviction and enthusiasm, but also patient education for those less technical than others, why now was the right opportunity. And I think that's something that I've seen versions of this a couple different times, whether it's Doug Bernauer walking us through nuclear power at Radiant, whether it's through Karan and Neil Kunjer walking us through reaction wheel design and electric propulsion for large satellites. These kinds of things, it's a common thread of the best founders building technical solutions, being able and confident to walk the less technical investor types through what they're doing in a way that makes it easy for them to understand. And that's what you have to do for attracting, retaining all sorts of talent. That's what you have to do for gaining customers, for raising capital. It's really one of the most important skills. So that's one of the ones, to your question, that really stands out for me.
Fascinating. So let's dig into that a bit deeper. Do you think this is an innate ability that Will had, or do you think he took time to build that idea and storyline? Because the best storytellers throughout history have used, not sure if you've heard of story shapes, where you say what could be, what is at the moment, what could be, what is at the moment, and the contrast between them, that draws emotion out of people. So I'm wondering if he gave you that sort of talk, or whether it was just pure, this is the tech, this is the opportunity, this is the market. What sort of conversation was it?
I think you're right in that, the way I would say it a little differently is the best stories elicit emotion, and venture is such an early game, especially at the early stage, first check investing. It's all about emotion because it's what it takes. It's the input that it takes to overcome the difficulties and the challenges and the uncertainties of the market that you're going to face. You have to be impassioned about whatever the problem is that you're solving. Now, that needs to be built on a foundation of pragmatic structuring and de-risking of risks. So you need somebody who has the technical understanding, the ability to build the team to go actually execute the plan. But there's lots of very exciting opportunities every day that are pitched to venture capitalists. What is the thing that's going to separate yours from the others? And oftentimes it can be the emotion, the enthusiasm, the joy with which you're able to tell a story and bring people on a journey. And I think to come back to Will and Varda, I think one of my favorite ones is when Will says, hey, you'll know we're successful when you can pitch a tent in the Utah desert and see a Varda capsule streaming back into the atmosphere every night of the week. That's visceral for people, and you're like, wow, that actually would be cool. And your mind can build on that in a way that builds more excitement without the founders even needing to be in the room. And that's a starting point, right? Technical diligence comes later, market mapping can come later, but you get that energy that you get, that enthusiasm that you get from envisioning that future reality really makes it worth doing the deep dive to make sure that you have conviction around some of the other things that you need to do on the diligence side.
That is an amazing image of the capsules coming back.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I feel like people, I've said this before on the podcast, how many SaaS founders are there out there? There's loads. It's very easy to imagine a new productivity software. I mean, it's still a huge challenge to build it into a successful company. I'm not taking away from that. But to have the awareness that you can make a capsule that goes into low Earth orbit and then enables new types of manufacturing is an incredible thing. So whether you call it deep tech founders or frontier founders, I'd like to know what you think the difference between those are. And you are one yourself. So how do you position yourself in sort of information flows to find out where these opportunities are if you are someone who sees yourself as more than just a software founder?
So just make sure I understand the question. So the question is, how do I position myself to find deep tech opportunities, or is it how do I differentiate
Yeah, I
between
guess
deep tech?
if you say you're an aspiring founder and you log onto Twitter, you're going to see like a load of things like this is how you find a viral loop to grow your marketplace startup. You're not going to see this is the cost of low Earth orbit satellites and it's coming down.
Yep.
So how can you set up some serendipity or conversations or get to a place where you're starting to spot those sorts of opportunities, similarly to this opportunity that you saw with Father Farms?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think that's part of the reason why we're very focused, and we say this on our website, and it's very genuine and authentic. We invest at the people stage. We're investing in people, and we're trying to invest in people that have the ambition and the vision to build a venture scale company. How we do that and where we think we can win and get excited and help them sell and help them attract and retain talent is a function of where we have an edge, and maybe that's in more technical businesses, maybe that's in more engineering heavy businesses, maybe that's in these deep tech businesses, however you may want to say it. But I think the big thing is to find whatever it is that is authentic to you from a technical perspective, and then try to figure out how you can craft a narrative that has both equal parts big, bold ambition, but also pragmatic near-term execution to a short time to value. And the reality is, if you're going to raise venture dollars, the number of those opportunities don't really grow on trees. So I think it's as much about understanding it's a rare founder to find that can be exceptional technically, be exceptional storytelling, be exceptional at recruiting and retaining talent, but also be tied in on the business and the market side enough to know where we are on the technology cost curve, what the power dynamics within a market structure are within a certain, what the power dynamics within the value chain are, and know how to play that from a time and space perspective. I think that's a rare thing to find, and that's one of the reasons why we have conviction. When we invest in founders, we try to bet big, is because we know how rare those kinds of people that can be nimble across all those different areas are. And that if you marry that with conviction towards a certain idea, authenticity of pursuing a certain solution, building a certain company in a certain culture, you'll find value.
Interesting. And it sounds like that's a very holistically balanced founder. It's not someone who's specialized super deep in one thing and become incredible at that. They've got the whole thing and all the awareness, as well as an understanding of what they're personally interested in.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So,
I think that's right.
Yeah. So how do you think do you have any ideas on how you developed that sort of intuitive understanding of yourself and what you're interested in, or how you block out the noise of, like finance jobs and all these sorts of things? How do you find that through line in yourself?
Yeah. I don't know that I have any great wisdom on this front, other than to say, more often than not, it's not people that are saying like, I want to start a company, what should I do? It's almost like this imperative of, I have this expertise, I've lived a life of intellectual curiosity and exceptional execution and ambition. Now's the time that I have to do this, right? I think if you waited 5 years to start a reentry, company or a microgravity manufacturing business is probably going to be too late. I think if you tried to do it 5 years ago, it's probably going to be too early, and the environment wasn't going to be right. So I think it's people who live in this constant state of seeking opportunity, and when they go after opportunity, they go after it with gusto. Like that is really what you're looking for more than a silver bullet, because the idea is just one part of the equation. The idea is like one very small part of the equation. The skill set to actually go the distance with some of these is much more around, can you build a team? Do you understand how to like build a right corporate culture, actually engineering culture? Do you know how to think about the right degree of risk to take? Do you know how to communicate that to the triumvirate of your employees, your investors, and your customers? Do you know how to build a brand? All those kinds of things that, for better or worse, early on, like they do emanate from the founders. They are largely just extensions of who the founders are. So finding those kind of N of one people that are uniquely suited to solve the problem that they're proposing to solve, call it founder market fit, like for the cliche, like that's largely what is even more important in these types of businesses versus versus a pure software business, where I think it helps to have somebody who sold sales productivity software, but you probably could be a founder outside of it and then come into it. And then if you're good on sales and you have a good intuitive product sense, you could probably make something that's valuable.
Interesting. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There's not like, you don't lay out a blueprint to be a deep tech founder. Maybe my questioning was misaligned because of that, but everyone on this podcast I've spoken to who has achieved something I find incredible, they followed their curiosity and they kept getting better so that they could follow their curiosity more. Mm-hmm. Like life would throw a blocker. And this is like, I had a runner on different business people, different VCs. And then as a result of the things that life throws at them, they get better and better and better at the thing. And then an opportunity comes and then they just go straight for that opportunity because they've morphed into the person who can smash the opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's why you oftentimes see like the best companies will be founded by people as kind of a second act after a first successful act. I think the odds, especially for these businesses, they're hard because they require a lot of capital. It's hard to iterate quickly. There's a difficult story that you need to get a lot of people bought into. It takes a degree of credibility that's established to be able to do these businesses really well.
Okay, well, in that case, on that thought, let's take it back to the start of Father Farms. You've been working for a few years. You've done some investing with Dawn Fund. Can you take us back there and think about what had you learned that you used and what gave you conviction that made you pursue the idea? So kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think at that time, a common theme in my career was, doing great work with smart people, smart, ambitious people. And that had served me well in the relatively short 6 or 7 year career I had at the time. And for me, it just felt like the next opportunity was something more entrepreneurial, and had a couple months of reflection where the ultimate conclusion was kind of like, if not now, then when? Tomorrow's, it's always easy to say I'll do it tomorrow. It's very hard to say I'll do it right now. And I think for me, with my co-founder, with the market timing, with the caliber of talent and technology that a Cornell University Food Science was developing to be starting a company out of Cornell University Food Science, I think all of those things lined up to say, hey, I want to be part of taking a technology that has the potential to be globally impactful from a university that has a reputation for developing technologies in that category that are exceptional, with a founder co-founder who is mission driven, exceptionally talented, values and mission aligned, and shared vision for kind of what this could be. It was kind of a bit of a no-brainer for me. And then we made some real progress and we started to build some momentum, raise some capital. Then once we had the capital and I could pay myself a small salary. I was able to go full time, leave my job at the endowment and do it. So that was kind of the journey from the two of us in a business school class to a large Series A and a bunch of cool food processing equipment in upstate New York and some of the cool things we've been able to do there over the years.
That's insane. So so you had a conversation and saw the opportunity. What were like the first steps you had to follow? Was it
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, I mean, credit to the business school class. I mean, it's very much like go basic stuff, like go do customer development, go talk to customers, figure out if they want the product you're proposing to sell, like understand the technology roadmap, like figure out what the capitalization of the business needs to be. What is your cash flow projections? Like what's the cost it's going to take you to get this thing running? What are the key risks of the business? How do you manage those risks? And writing like a 30-page business plan at the time for a business school class. Dude, that's funny. I don't invest in any businesses that have 30-page business plans these days, but it was, it's a good exercise to go through when you're just at the front end of kind of an entrepreneurial journey. And it's a very academic way of doing it relative to, I think, putting a table out front and starting a lemonade stand. But I think it's important to have a forcing function of actually going and talking to customers. And it's funny, we had an internship program the first summer after we started the company where we had 5 interns, and I had 2 or 3 of them. Their whole job was literally just to go talk to restaurants and do like a sheet, interview the restaurant owner and collect information and data on the restaurant and actually talk to a customer. And for a lot of them, that was a new thing, but you do it, you get comfortable with it pretty quickly, and then it becomes a bit of a special skill that you have.
Interesting. So you didn't speak to manufacturing people first. You spoke to the end customer.
Yep, exactly.
Even though that wasn't your direct customer, or was that?
Well, at the time it was, hey, we need to get some validation that people would want this product, how they would use it, what the killer use case would be for the end customer, and then work backwards to figure out how to finance the plan.
Okay.
Figure out how to finance the pilot plan, figure out how to size the pilot plan by getting some letters of intent from some of these people that they wanted the product itself. So it was talking to the end users to get there, even if long-term we thought, hey, maybe we'll service them with actual product, but maybe we'll actually just put a technology layer.
Okay. And now that you're big grown up, Mike, what would you look back on and say, I don't know why I did that, or that was a mistake? And or did you just smash it out of the park first time?
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know that I would change any of my experience as a first-time entrepreneur in that way, because I think doing it in school over time allowed me to like learn, make mistakes, to have tolerance for risk, figure out what worked, what didn't, have a lot of support and mentorship to build the conviction that it takes to really like go out on your own. So it's a big leap for people to go from working at another bigger institution, more stable opportunity with a long-term growth trajectory, and then take that leap into entrepreneurship where, even finances aside, it's risky. It's, for many people, it's the first time in their life where they've had to be ultimately responsible for the outcome of something. And I think jumping into that 2 feet first is a very emotionally challenging thing to do if you've never been responsible for the outcome and been responsible for other people, been responsible for gathering resources that you need to pursue an uncertain mission with lack of clarity on whether or not it's going to be really valuable. So I think kind of slow walking and building momentum over time was very useful for me, for my own entrepreneurial journey, to give me, even now starting my own firm, I didn't hesitate at all because I've been living in a entrepreneurial lifestyle for 7 years now. It's not foreign.
Do you think it's a bigger risk to start a startup or to stay in a career?
Bigger risk to start a startup. I think people need to do what they ultimately are having the most fun doing. They find the most joy in doing. Like the sum total that gets to the greatest number, if you could quantify how much fun you're having and how much joy you have in your day-to-day life, do whatever that is. I think everybody has a different risk tolerance. I think different moments in time have different risk calculations associated with them. I think taking a career first lens for a lot of people can be a path to a life of unhappiness, quite honestly. So I think there's risks in both, right? I think there's definitely risks if you just kind of are static and you don't invest in yourself and you don't grow and you don't develop. But obviously, and those are maybe more intangible risks that are harder to quantify, versus you go out and start a company, you have no salary. Those risks are right in your face if you don't have other means of income or wealth to kind of support yourself in the journey.
Mm. How do you think about risk? And do you think, the books like Thinking in Bets and things like that, have you got any thoughts on that? And is there anything that you do in your life to make bets?
Yeah. So
I mean, obviously
my
you're an investor, but aside
yeah
from that,
yeah 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 yeah
yeah,
yeah yeah my I don't know that I have a really rugged framework for how I think about risk. What I tend to think about is more on the return side, which is I think people are good at understanding whether they should or shouldn't take a risk, but they're not so good at understanding as whether or not they're actually getting compensated appropriately for the risk they're taking.
Mm.
So, you know, for me to, let's say, start a venture firm and risk, quote unquote, 50% higher base salary for the next 5 years, um, what does the return need to be for that? Right? How much do I have to exceed that number? And that's just a mathematical version. Now you may be able to discount that by saying, well, I just love the day to day of what I'm doing. I love building this. So maybe it's actually less risky. I don't perceive that as a risk. Right? I think risk is individual at the end of the day, and it
Yeah,
shifts with time. So I
yeah,
think it's a thing that constantly needs to be updated as you're developing. What I try to think about is the best, as I'm kind of talking out loud here, and getting to something maybe a little more interesting, is the longer duration I think on, the better I am at making risk return decisions. Because if I think on a 1 year time horizon, who knows? It's very tough to predict 12 months out. But if I say, what am I going to do for the next decade and let me commit myself to it, then there really is risk there. But the odds of you being right 10 years out are, if you have one purpose in mind, are way higher than being right predicting 1 year out. And if you make it 20 years out, now if you say, hey, in 20 years, I want to be a US congressman, what would you do if you had 20 years to become a US congressman and work your way backwards? If you put your mind to it, you probably could figure it out. I think what happens is most people don't say in 20 years, this is what I want to do. So then when they have to make the little day-to-day decisions and they have to decide between A and B, they don't know what they're optimizing for. So from my perspective, when I say, and I write about this, say, hey, I want to build the best seed stage venture firm on the planet, and I'm going to do this for the next 30 plus years, it becomes very easy for me to say that my forcing function is always think about what the right thing is for the long term of the firm. And that's pretty easy, which is invest in great companies, invest in great founders, and support them ferociously for the long term. Don't be transactional between the here and now.
yeah. And it comes through in the way you communicate and how you think and what your priorities are. One of your essays that you wrote recently about having fun and play to win, that's what you're looking for, people who are having fun and playing to win.
Mm-hmm.
It's just seems to be a better way to live than what's put forward by lots of like hustle porn and things like this, where it's saying like wake up at 6 a.m., go to the gym, do this, do that, do that. But at the end of the day, if you are having fun and you're playing the game that you want to play, first of all, you've already won. Second of all, you're most likely to win at that game because you can play it for the longest time.
Yep.
I saw an interesting thing where it's like 50% of a successful business, or whatever, or any endeavor is the idea, but probably not even that. And the other 50% is, or 50% is what you do each day, but the other 50% is how long you can do it for.
Mm-hmm.
So is that part of this have fun and play to win thesis?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a compounding strategy. I think it's one of those, you try to make sure that people are having fun, that they're playing to win. You bring other people that are doing the same thing. They tend to help each other out. You tend to work harder. You tend to be able to see the optimism in things versus the pessimism in things. There, there is a lot more, it's much more constructive. And I think constructive day-to-day people that are constructive on a day-to-day basis are going to be way more successful in the long run. I think there will be winners in the short run who, carry a big stick. I don't think have fun, play, and win means don't hold people accountable. I don't think it means, have a low bar. I don't think it means be nice. I think it means have fun, find joy in what you're doing, and do it because you love to win. Like that's what we're looking for here. This is still business. It's still capitalism. You have to have all those kinds of things. But the mentality there is much more, what are you doing to make this experience memorable? Because the reality is, just like the best founders have lots of choice on investors, the best talent has lots of choice on which companies to join. And if they wanted to chase money, they're probably not working in startups. They're working there for a different reason. And most people like to have fun. That's the reality. Some people just want to work on ambitious problems, and there's room for people like that, and that's fine. I mean, you need that too in venture, but I think the one thing where I think is the low-hanging fruit that most companies don't have is they just don't have enough fun. They're too serious. You want people that are serious people, is another phrase, that don't take themselves too seriously.
Interesting. Can you give us any case studies from your founders that you've worked with? What that
Yeah, I
looks
mean,
like?
I wrote about this in I wrote about this in that piece that you referenced, in our master plan, kind of the have fun, play to win thesis. To come back to Varda, I think the fun thing of Will getting a marching band when they shipped their first capsule off after it was completed, and having the marching band kind of see off the capsule. Like, that's a memorable thing and a memorable moment that people really, really enjoy. I think, in terms
I'd
of
say Will doesn't sound like a classic engineer. I studied
he's not.
engineering, and he sounds special.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He actually just walked by the room and waved.
Oh no.
But I think about, like, we invested in a company called Cala, which is doing robotic restaurants in Paris. And you just look at the brand, the irreverent brand that they've created, and you go to the stores and you see the customers, like, seemingly having a good time. You see a bunch of kind of younger kids building robots in the shop that are then being installed in a restaurant, and, like, seeing them in the world. And they're working till 2 a.m., doing low tolerance CNC machining. Like, they're having a good time. It's fun. And that shows in the product they put out on the field. Right? I think that's a really cool one, and you should check them out if you haven't seen them. But Alon is a great founder in that regard, where he's very serious, he's very ambitious, he's very technically capable and talented. He's built a really great team. He's super gritty, super persistent. But you talk to him and, like, he's cool, calm, collected. Seems like he's had fun. He's enjoying going to the stores and making sure that they're working on time. He's enjoying working through the manufacturing of the robots that they're building. All those kinds of things. It seems like he's really having a good time.
How's it spelled? The name?
Cala. I think the website is Cala, EATCALA.
I want to understand why their brand is irreverent, but I also would like to know, when you invested, obviously you've got more data points now, so you can look back and say that all these things about him. But what was it that stood out about him when you invested?
Yeah, I think I knew some people that were around the table and knew him really well. Yeah, there's a fun story I'll tell about Alon. Is, as we were getting to know each other, he was like, "Hey, do you know these people you could introduce me to?" And I threw out the idea. I said, "Hey, you know what? I think a lot of them are going to be, in this area next week." I said, "You should. I know it's in 4 days. You should just come over and I'll introduce you and see if you can get together with all of them at the same time." And he thought about it and he was like, "You know what? I'll do it." So we spent the weekend kind of making introductions, setting up meetings, and now that he booked his ticket, then I was helping him try to get his passport so he could come, not his visa, so he could come over. I didn't find out until weeks later that it was the first time he'd ever come to the U.S. And he came on 4-day notice and had a bunch of good meetings, and everybody introduced him said how great he was and like his passion, enthusiasm, how that all kind of came through. And that was a memorable moment for me because, for him, it's a blast. Like, get on a plane and go to Miami. Well, dude, that's awesome on a short notice. Those are the kinds of things that make startup memories. And, I've got a bunch of those myself from my own experiences. But I think doing those things show somebody's serious, that they care. It's amazing how just getting on the plane on short notice is actually such a good indicator of wanting to make it happen.
Yeah. And coming back to when we were talking about risk, I think what the difference was between the risks we were talking about, one was a financial risk and one was the risk of not pursuing your passion. And it seems like this just made me think of when people stop their idea, like, oh, I don't want to pay for a plane ticket because it costs $1,000. It's like, that's money, which is a terrible way of accounting for anything worthwhile. So I guess part of it is just saying like, fuck it, I'm going to fly to Miami tomorrow, spend the whole weekend, meet all these people, and then change the course of my company.
Yep. Yeah, I think people are drawn to that degree of zeal, which is a whole side thing of a. Yeah, I think that's a vocabulary word that needs to be used more in the industry, is kind of enthusiasm and energy in pursuit of an idea. But I think the minute you lose that, it's usually the beginning of the end. But I think when you have it and you demonstrate it, it shows people you're in it, that you're all in, and that gets them over a lot of the open questions and hurdles that they may have.
How do the best founders demonstrate grit and persistence so that their team are A, enticed to join, and then B, encouraged to keep working hard on the problems they're solving?
Yeah, I don't know that it's formulaic. I think every founder has their own way of doing it. I think ultimately the way I would answer the question is the best founders lead. And they don't coddle their team, but they don't tell them what they want to hear. They tell them what needs to be said, but they do it in a respectful way that comes from a position of credibility that's built over years of doing what you say you're going to do, which builds trust. The best leaders have the trust of their team. Right? It's the Buffett thing, right? Like, takes years to build and 5 minutes to lose. And so it's a fragile thing. But I don't think people follow grit or persistence. I think they follow leadership and leaders. And the reality is, it's the person who can kind of navigate the stresses of being in the founder seat or in the CEO seat, while also maintaining kind of a calm, collected, stable presence for other people that are probably feeling the same thing the founder's leading. And that's maybe the hardest job of any founder, especially a first-time founder that's never had to do that before, is projecting confidence, conviction, and intentionality amidst a sea of uncertainty. And how do you overcome that? How do you articulate that to your team? How do you inspire them in the face of all of that? It's easy to do when you're winning, when you're raising big rounds, or when the revenue's up and to the right. It's easy to do. I think the best founders are tried by the hardest times, and that's maybe obvious to say. And I can think even of my own experiences where I might have been able to do things a little better or a little differently, and other experiences where I felt like we navigated it really, really well.
I understand what you're saying, and I can imagine. I think the words almost don't do it justice, because the leader has to take. They might hear news that the money they needed to extend their runway and continue the business has just fallen through, but they can't tell the team. So their world has just fallen apart, but they have to internalize that. How do you do that? Did you have any big things where you had to, as you say, project a happy version of you? Do you have a support network around you who you like lean on? How do you navigate being a leader in that sense?
Yeah, I part of being a leader is being able to communicate bad news while also projecting a path, presenting a path forward. The more you can do that, the more people start to build confidence in your ability to navigate those ups and downs. So, okay, the big money we needed to get to the next stage isn't going to come through. Now what? Right? Well, there's a difference between we're going to keep talking to other investors and we'll let you know. And, the money just fell through. But me and Jennifer and Steve, the leadership team, are leaving right now to go to XYZ place to spend the weekend putting our heads together on figuring out how we're going to solve this problem. If you'd like to participate in that, let us know. Happy to include, because it's all hands on deck to make this thing work. Or it fell through. We've been trying to raise for 9 months. We don't think it's going to happen. We're making the difficult decision to do XYZ. Here's what that means for you and your families, and here's how we're going to communicate that to you and work through all the details. Right? Action. People respect action, not words.
Yeah, that's really cool. And also, in this day and age, I feel like people have started to forget that you can actually take action in the real world. You can knock on offices, you can go and visit people. It doesn't have to be, right, I'm going to go and send 100 cold emails. You can get out there and do things.
Yep.
What was the hardest part of Father Sons
The hardest part
for you?
I think the hardest part was learning how to manage people with the right blend of transparency and let me say it. Finding the right degree of information to share that gave people what they needed to move forward, but also not having a position on a topic, right? So it really was like that leadership piece of knowing how to be the rock for them, but also not coddle them and not kind of share exactly what was going on. I think that was that's definitely an art form. I think you go out, you get punched in the mouth by the market, or by the technology you're trying to develop. I think navigating that, which I think we actually did quite well, and had some very supportive investors and board members that continue to be critical to the success of the company to this point. I think all of that together just comes down to people and learning how to manage people, not in like a corporate kind of way, but more from a human psychology kind of way. That's the biggest learning for me, and it's something I'm still learning how to do this effectively, maintain positive relationships in the face of uncertainty and difficult challenges, how to make hard decisions, how to communicate those hard decisions while maintaining your values orientation and being true to your values.
Let's say, I don't know, a team member or an investor or some partner did you wrong. And this is kind of a pertinent question to things that happen in the world at the moment. How do the best leaders respond to a attack out of vulnerability from another person, or an attack for some reason from another person?
I mean, it to a certain extent, the best leaders are supposed to represent the will of the people they represent. The main reason why, once you start losing the culture of an organization, it's very hard for that leader to recover the culture or to recover the trust of the team. And And it requires spending one-on-one time with team members. It requires having ongoing conversations. It requires um, understanding more than you might think exactly what your people are up to on a day-to-day basis, so you can understand the pulse of the organization, the will of the organization at any given point in time. So I think if you're doing that job and you're doing it really, really well, then I think you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I think that's ultimately what it is.
So there could be, and the parallel I'm drawing now is in football in the UK, you might call it soccer, but I would firmly disagree. They have teams and they swap the managers out, some teams very frequently to try and get results. But from what you said, it seems like once an organization reaches a certain size, it has a life and desire of its own. And therefore, leader from this position won't necessarily suit that club. So you need to find someone who is able to represent the will of that group of people. And you can't change the will of that group of people.
Yeah, I think that's right. Those are the best organizations, is because that leader, if they're appropriately tapped into the pulse of the organization, they can make decisions on behalf of the organization way more quickly and set direction with way more conviction than somebody who doesn't have the pulse of the organization. Because at the end of the day, all these things are about how fast can we get stuff done, how fast can we execute, how fast can we hire, all those kinds of things. The more in tune you are with the people and the relationships between your people, the more effective you're going to be able to be as a leader. That's just a fact. And it doesn't matter where your credentials are. People don't respect credentials. It doesn't matter what you did in the past. What matters is the respect that people feel you have for them and the respect they have for you. So when you have to make a difficult decision or you have to set a company direction, that people get behind you vigorously and they move. And that's what it takes, especially so in startups.
I'm really interested. I find it very hard looking from the outside to work out what different leaders do in different situations. And I'm sure that's obviously a hugely broad question. But on a general sense, what's like the profile or day-to-day activities of a seed stage founder who's taking, let's say, seed to Series B, and then a sort of CEO at IPO level, and then a board director? And how do their responsibilities vary?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a seed stage founder, you kind of have one job, which is find product market fit. It's maybe a little more nuanced with tech businesses, but generally speaking, it's find product market fit and try to do that as resource efficiently as you can without burning out. I think when you talk about a CEO of a public company, that CEO is very much entrusted with a very large organization who serves a lot of people in terms of its customers and also maintains a culture of its employees. And you are very much, I almost would say a politician, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I think it comes back to this idea of leadership is understanding the will of the people that make the product that you sell and the will of the people who buy the product that you sell. And sitting in the middle and figuring out, how do I optimize the resources to do more of that? How do I grow my business? How do I give more opportunity to my employees? How do I create more value for my customers? And all of that is putting the right pieces on the chessboard, the right people playing the game at the different points in time. So it is very much a human psychology position, understanding your investor psychology, understanding your board member psychology, understanding your employees and leadership psychology. With respect to your question on board members, I think the best board members have the right blend of experience, empathy, and leadership skills to coach the management team into decisions that help them drive the business forward. Oftentimes it's not done in board meetings. It really shouldn't be done in the board meetings. I think it's done in one-on-one phone calls. I think it's done subtly. I think it's done in a tactful manner. That's what the best board members are able to do. And it all is built on a foundation of trust. I think it's very hard to have board members that you don't have an innate trust and alignment with. I think doing that work to build trust allows you to have people that help you cover your blind spots, but there needs to be a really high bar for the people that you give access to, that level of access to, that have that level of information, that are able to guide you, or you're willing to let guide you in making decisions. Because ultimately, especially in startups, right? I think public companies are a different kind of thing, but in startups, it's the founder's company, it's the CEO's company. The board is there to support the founder, look after their investment, and make sure that where things are moving in a positive direction, and when it's not, be there to support in tweaking, the direction of the ship a little bit here and there. So I think there's lots of different types of board members that can add value. But generally speaking, I think if you're a CEO trying to build out an early board, that's really what you're looking for, is somebody you trust, but somebody who you think can hold you accountable, can support you through difficult times, and can navigate that boardroom.
So as a board member yourself, if you thought that a founder was taking the wrong direction, how would you leverage your understanding of human psychology to suggest a new way forward? Because I'm assuming you can't tell them. You have to either show them or make them realize themselves.
Yeah. So I've been on boards since I was 24. I was on a nonprofit board in New York City for a bunch of years. I managed my board of 8 people for 5 or 6 years at Farther Farms. I've been on the Varda board for the last 3 years. I'm by no means the most expert person on venture boards or anything like that, but I've seen enough things over the years of kind of what has worked and what doesn't work. So your question was around, if I felt they were going in the wrong direction. I think the big thing is, my job is not to express my opinion without in a group format that is either uninformed or without being asked specifically. My job is to be there asking intelligent questions that drives at whether or not we're taking the right risks, and whether or not we're investing our resources in a way that eliminate or reduce the right risks. And it's more about getting the founder or the management team that may happen to be there to talk out loud about their thought process of how they're making decisions. It's not to make decisions for the management team. That's the management team's job. The board's job is just to understand the psychology of how the management team is making their decisions, and by extension, how they're thinking about the business and what's most important, which can provide leading indicators of where we should be investing our time to dive deeper, either in a committee or in one-on-one time or in a site visit, whatever it may be, using our resources to help solve the problems, to asking questions to help suss out what the real root cause of challenges may be. But they need to be at the appropriate layer of abstraction, that you don't just plug a leak and then spring another leak. If you need to change the captain, you change the captain. But I think that takes some time to get to that point. And that's not even a specific reference to the CEO. It's more of a sticking with the maritime reference. So that's kind of how I think about the role of a board.
And this is now going to be a completely junior question. Do the board members, are they all investors? Is that how they get compensated? Or is there
most of the time, yes, but not always. When certain companies reach certain levels of maturity, you may get independent board members that come on. When you have public company boards, those board members will be paid in stock in the company, and they'll be paid in cash oftentimes. For venture boards, up to Series C, Series D, something like that, it's usually just the investors, the preferred, are taking board seats, and maybe some in the common as well. So there's I don't think there's hard and fast rules. I do think there's heuristics for different stages, though.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. I wish that people would live stream their board meetings, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Coming back to Carla, and you said they had an irreverent brand. First of all, great language. Second of all, what makes an irreverent brand for a deep tech company? And what do you think what is the point of that for them?
I don't know that I think about like deep tech companies, irreverent brands. I think, for Cala, it's more about its customers, like the tone that they've iterated to, which works for their initial customer base, and over time maybe it changes. That tone of voice may change over time to be static. I think that's the thing with brands, is that a lot of times they'll iterate the message as they appeal to different audiences and try to increase the audience they can go after. What I think is important on the brand side for deep tech businesses, more generally speaking, is that you speak to someone and you say something. More often, people talk about, we're building this cool technology, we're building a giant Dyson sphere. And that'll be cool, some engineers. But I think the reality is, a lot of people probably just want to go home and be able to explain simply what they do to their grandmother. And it's a lot easier to say I'm doing in-space manufacturing than I'm developing low-cost reentry capsules for manufacturing crystalline structures and microgravity. So I think being able to articulate that allows your K factor, your virality to increase. It allows you to differentiate from other companies. It makes you memorable, where a broad range of people will become engaged in what you're doing. So much of venture and startups is about getting people from non-consensus to consensus, and that starts with getting people excited about the idea that you're pursuing, which gets you the capital and the talent to go execute, and the execution gets you the customers validate the idea. Next thing you know, you look back 7 years later and you say, oh, that was pretty easy, but it started with the kernel of an idea and getting people excited about the potential for that idea.
And then what do you think are the key parts of specifically frontier tech and deep tech? What are the key parts of their brand? Is it the scientist team? Is it the founder? Is it the visual methods of communication they use? Language?
Yeah, I think the founder has a lot to do with it. I don't think you can ignore the impact of the founder on the brand, on the perception of the brand, on the story that's being told. It's just you can't kind of shake it. I think all the other stuff is really validating of the founder themselves and their approach. So if it's a great website, if it's a great logo, if it's a great pitch deck, I think all those things emanate from the founder themselves.
And I guess especially at the stage where you invest, because at that stage it is the people. But then, okay, so let's say the founders got the investment and now they're trying to build the best team and they've already got a few good team members. What then do they need to have to find the best team and attract them and keep them?
Yeah, I just think there's no substitute for word of mouth. I think when you reach out cold to an engineer, which I've done hundreds of times in my life, having them know who you are, having some credible stories out there about you, I think is really important. I don't know how you recruit engineers without a website unless you already know them really well and they respect you. That's where I think the brand really comes into play, is when, a great propulsion engineer is being asked to leave SpaceX to go work at your company. They have to go home to their girlfriend or wife or significant other, whatever it might be at that particular point, and say, hey, I got asked to join this company. And the girlfriend or wife or significant other Googles the company and says, I've never even heard of this company. This seems a little bit sketchy, right? Now, all of a sudden, you can't hire that engineer. So great technology. Maybe you got some great investors, but being able to get some credibility out there quickly is a critical part of being able to build that early team, because of these kind of more subtle things under the surface.
Yeah, interesting. One of my best friends from uni is an incredible engineer, and he started working for an engineering consultancy firm in Cambridge in the UK. And he talks about his founders, and one of them has, I can't remember if it's rowed across the Atlantic or run across America, but for him, like, that was like a signifier that this person is serious and he takes his life seriously and he's able to overcome difficulties. And as a result, his belief in that person is very tangible, and it's quite cool to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about space, which I'm guessing you've got a whole thesis on, but what other technologies are appealing to you at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not a big like this technology is exciting to me because I think people build technology. Authentic people develop the best technology at the speed that you couldn't even contemplate. Um, so I think, if there were any high level things that get me excited, and what I've thought a lot about this is, what is the common thread? You've heard me say this word a bunch today. Um, it's the idea of authenticity. I just think the next decade or two is really going to be about that. Um, Information and insights and content has become so abundant and so cheap. I think anything that is authentic in nature is going to be amongst the most demanded things out there in the world. And I think hardware fits squarely into that. There's no way to fake hardware. I think if you build something real and put it into the world, it's going to feel real. And a lot of people are going to want to work on those kinds of problems and build those kinds of things. But you want it to be something that gets into the real world, not something that's maybe necessarily invisible to the real world. So if it's nuclear reactors, if it's robots in restaurants, if it's bioreactors, if it's space manufacturing, if it's phased array towers, cell towers, right? Like those kinds of things are the things that you're going to look at and say, like, that was an exciting problem to work on. And I made my family proud. I made money. We built something cool. We have a culture I was proud to be a part of establishing. All those things. Like that's, I think, what we're looking for. And there's a broad range of stuff. I think it's space, energy, climate, AI, healthcare. I think those are all sorts of areas, and finding the intersections of all those, right? Underlying commodity type technologies that have been developed, and now saying, okay, now that RF transmitters are sufficiently small or low power, what can we do? Or said differently, what have we been wanting to do, but now can only do because RF transistors are small? That's the way I actually think about technology, is what can we, for ventures, what can we do with it now that the investment dollars have brought something to the point where it's more in the application phase or the technology deployment phase.
So would you say you're not necessarily a tech nerd then? More of a people nerd?
Look, I think fun fact about me, I've never really written a line of code in my life outside of Boolean logic in Excel, building very complex models in Excel. And I've never, designed an integrated circuit in my life, for example, right? Like I've never done that. But I like all that stuff. I grew up playing with Legos as a kid, building lots of Lego sets, and I love playing video games and, strategy games and civilization games and things like that. So I like building things. I like creating things. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a technology nerd, but I love having people explain to me how things work and why they work. And my wife may get annoyed with me sometimes when I express my curiosities in some of these things and try to explain them and say, no, it's so cool. You got to see how this thing's, and she's just like, yes, I get it. And then she's very tolerant, patient. She likes it sometimes, but sometimes, my curiosity gets the better. I think what you want is the people who are focused less on tinkering and more on building. I think it starts with an enthusiasm and a curiosity, but I think it needs to be focused with action towards outcome, where that outcome is a product that's being shipped. I think that's probably where we see the biggest attrition in things that sound interesting on paper versus things we can actually invest in, is people who have a demonstrated history of building the thing they say they're going to build versus saying they're going to try to build the thing.
So I guess that it's easy to get that feeling of excitement when you've discovered like an idea. It's then easy to be successful when you're successful in that idea. But what's hard is crossing the huge chasm of work between those two milestones. Yeah. Is there a flywheel that you're expecting at Also Capital that you imagine is going to come? So the more you do X, it leads back in and sort of makes an exponential.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the I think it gets back to the master plan, right? Invest in great founders, write bigger checks into great founders, and then keep doing that for 3 decades. And I think we'll be amazed where we'll be at that point in time. And I have conviction in that. If you keep a high bar, You support founders to go succeed. They have a certain level of success. They go again. They come back to you again because you were the right partner. I think all of that I think that's the way to success. There's no shortcut for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if you strip it all back, is a VC fund essentially a network of incredible people?
More or less.
And then as you have founders who come through also and you give them money, they exit, they become the board members of tomorrow who suggest ways to use their technology with other technology and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, fascinating. What an amazing business. What an amazing business. What is your dream?
I'm living my day-to-day dream. I'm talking to you from a beautiful conference room in the Presidio in San Francisco. I'm getting sent pictures of my two beautiful girls from the day that they're having, and I'll be home to see them on Saturday. About to go into a board meeting of one of the most exciting companies on the planet right now, and I'm in the middle of growing what I think has the potential to be one of the best seed funds on the planet. After starting a company from a napkin and taking that through to potentially impact one of the largest food value chains in the world. I wouldn't change any of that. This is the best life. This is the best life.
That is unreal. You're living it. You're living the dream. That is sick. That was actually, I know you need to go to this board meeting, which honestly, I wish you just wore a GoPro all day. I would watch the live stream of just what happens. But the one thing I did think of is that I'm interested to know what being a dad taught you about life.
I've been saying recently to folks, I said, nothing clarifies the mind quite like having two kids under 3 years old. I think what it's taught me is what's most important in my life, which is being able to find the right blend of being able to be there for, my spouse, my kids, my family, while also being able to pursue the professional ambitions that give me the most joy. I think having kids basically says, hey, your time is short and valuable. Make sure that you're being very discerning who you're spending that time with and how you're spending that time. I think that's the biggest thing that having kids really teaches is the making poor decisions with your time has a much greater cost now, and you need to really be thoughtful about that.
I think people always react to sort of constraints and difficulty and being overloaded as a negative thing. But what I'm hearing from you is the right constraint actually streamlines your decision making to the point where you're actually making better decisions and you've got more time doing what you love.
It's that feeling means it's time to evolve, and it's evolve how you think, what you spend your time on, the prices you charge for your services, right? I think the minute you start to get overloaded, it's time to rethink and evolve. I think that's the best indicator that you can find. It's not stay the same and build structures for how to be less overloaded. It's move the bar.
Well, one amazing way to end. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. And I'm so excited that we've met. And I'm so excited to see what happens over the next few decades, because I really think that what you're building is going to impact millions of lives for the better, billions even. And I mean, what other measure is there? That's incredible. So I'm excited to see.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Ollie, and thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to come on and chat.
Anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome.
Appreciate it.
Sweet.
All right, man.
Welcome to Brick by Brick, episode 18, with Mike Annunziata, founding partner of Also Capital, co-founder of Farther Farms, and board member at Varda Space. This is going to be a big one.